Hi everyone, this video is about solving equations. So an equation is a mathematical statement with two sides separated with an equal sign and one unknown variable. And that unknown variable is what we're trying to find. So once we find that variable that makes both sides equal, that means we've solved an equation. To solve that equation, we use what we call the inverse operations. Basically, we want to move things from one side to the other side until we have that unknown variable by itself, where the other side of the equation that's left over is our answer, is the solution. To do that, if we have a plus, the opposite of plus is minus, so we would subtract that thing to the other side, and alternatively, or conversely, if it was a minus, we would add it to the other side. Same with multiplication and division. They are inverse operations. So when I see a multiply, I would divide that number to get rid of it. Or if I saw a division, or what we more likely see, a fraction, if we see a fraction, what we do is we'll multiply that across to the other side. So without further ado, let's just jump into a bunch of examples of these. So starting off with these, here's an equation where we have 5x minus 6 equals 19, and I want to solve this equation. The way that we're going to do that is by using our inverse operations. I want to move this 5 over and this 6 over, so I'm just left with the x by itself. And we're going to use our inverse operations. But importantly, it's always worthwhile thinking about the order in which we're going to do that, because that does make a difference. The best rule of thumb I can give you when doing this is you want to move over the thing that's furthest away from the x. So if I was to choose whether to get rid of the 5 or the 6 first, we see that the 5 is connected to the x, but that 6 is kind of hanging off it. So the best thing to do first would be to get rid of that 6. So now using our inverse operations, here this is saying minus 6. So the opposite of minus 6 is plus 6. So whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. By adding 6 on both sides, we're going to get rid of that 6, leaving me with just 5x, and then 19 plus 6 equals 25. Now we're just one step away from solving this equation. So here we have 5x. 5x means 5 times x. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 5. Divide by 5, because whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So we're left with x equals 5. And now we've solved that equation, and we can check to see if that answer is right by substituting it into the original equation. If I did 5 times 5, that equals 25. 25 minus 6 does indeed equal 19. So we have our answer. Let's go to this next one. So I'm trying to find that value of x once again. So I need to first decide, should I get rid of the 6 or the negative 2 first? Again, the 2 is connected to the x. So let's get rid of that 6 that's hanging off. And that's saying a plus 6. There's an imaginary plus 6 sitting in front of that. So I'm going to subtract 6, subtract 6. And so this leaves me with negative 2x equals 14. Now what we need to do is get rid of this negative 2. Just note really quickly, this is saying negative 2 times x. So the opposite of timesing is dividing. So here I want to divide by not only 2, but I want to divide by negative 2. I also want to get rid of that negative. But whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other side. So by dividing by negative 2, I get rid of that 2. 14 divided by negative 2 equals negative 7. So my answer for this equation is negative 7. So those are some basic equations. Looking at some more types of equations, here we have what we call equations with pronumerals on both sides. In that here we have an x there, but we also have an x there. And that presents a problem, because for us to solve equations, we need to have x on one side. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move one of those x's to the other side. Let's start off by moving this 5x to this side. This is saying plus 5x. The opposite of that is minus 5x. So I'm going to subtract 5x to take it to the other side. whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other side. However, I'm not going to do 4 minus 5 because, as we know, our most basic rule of algebra is we can only add and subtract like terms. So I am going to do 6x minus 5x, which equals 1x, or we could just write x. But I can't do 4 minus 5 because they're not like terms. So I have x plus 4 equals 11. So I've taken that 5x to one side, and now we have x by itself, which is on one side. So now we just got to take over this 4 to the other side. The way that we do that, we have plus 4, so we're going to minus 4, minus 4. We'll get x equals 7, and there's our solution. Similarly here, we have x's on both sides once again. So to start us off, I want to take one of the x's to the other side. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. I just always tend to go from right to left. So if I have, if I do 5x, I'm going to subtract 5x. I want to subtract 5x. 8x minus 5x equals 3x minus 4 equals 17. The next thing I want to do is think about, well, should I get rid of the 3 or the 4 first? Our rule of thumb tells us that we want to get rid of the thing furthest away from the x. So I'm going to get rid of the 4 first, add 4, add 4. I get 3x equals 21. And lastly, I want to divide by 3, divide by 3. I get x equals 7. Now, different type of equation. Here we have equation with brackets. And if you remember how we expand brackets, we multiply the thing that's in front of the bracket by everything inside the bracket one at a time. So that's what we're going to do first with these kinds of equations. I'm going to expand the brackets by doing 6 times 4x, which equals 24x. And we're going to do 6 times negative 2, which equals negative 12. And that equals 36. So I haven't done anything crazy yet. All I've really done so far is I've just expanded the brackets. Now the next step is I need to think, well, should I get rid of the 24 or the 12 first? Again, that 12 is furthest away, so I'm going to add 12, add 12. This gives me 24x equals 48. And then lastly, now I can divide by 24, divide by 24. 48 divided by 24, x equals 2. And there's my answer. Similarly with this example, is the exact same thing, except now we have 2 sets of brackets. So we're going to expand those brackets, and we're also going to expand these brackets. So 5 times x is 5x, 5 times negative 3 is negative 15, 2 times 2x is 4x, 2 times 1 is 2, and that equals 23. Next thing I can do is I can look to simplify this left side. So I see that I got 5x plus 4x. So that equals 9x. And then I also have minus 15 plus 2, which equals minus 13. And that equals 23. All right. By the way, you might have noticed in each of these equations that I've done so far, I've always had my equal sign down in a straight line, an equal sign down the straight line, my equal sign going down a straight line, equal sign going down a straight line, and I'm working down the page. That makes just reading these equations and doing your work a whole lot more simple by making sure your equal sign just goes down the page in a column and everything wraps around that. Anyway. Continuing on with where I was. So now I need to decide, should I get rid of the 9 or the 13 first? I'm going to get rid of the 13 because it's furthest away from the x. So plus 13, plus 13. So I have 9x equals 36. And lastly, I want to divide by 9. Divide by 9. X equals 4. Last type of examples that we have here are equations with fractions. And fractions, as I mentioned at the start of this video, is just another way of writing division. So starting us off, first of all, I have x over 7 minus 1. Thinking about, well, what should I get rid of first, the 7 or the 1? And again, the 1's furthest away, so I'm going to plus 1, plus 1. So I have x over 7 equals 3. Now, x over 7, that's the same as saying x divided by 7. And the inverse operation of divided by 7 is timesing by 7. So I'm going to get x equals 21. Lastly, looking at this example, I need to get rid of the 2, the 7, and the 5. And always thinking about in which order I should think about. So I'm definitely not going to get rid of the 2 first because that's connected to the x. So deciding whether I need to get rid of the 7 or the 5 first, I'm going to get rid of the 5 because at least the 7 is still in the numerator with the x, whereas the 5 is in the denominator by itself. So I'm going to multiply by 5 first of all. So multiply by 5, multiply by 5. This is going to leave me with 2x minus 7 equals 5. 9 times 5 equals 45. Then I can simply just add 7, add 7. So I have 2x equals 52. And then lastly, I can divide by 2, x equals 26. And that's it. That's solving equations, all different types of equations, whether they be basic ones, whether they be with equations of both sides, whether they be equations with brackets, or whether they be equations with fractions. Just by using an inverse operation, so just thinking about the order in which you do things, solving these equations should be fairly easy. Thanks for watching.